Okay, we've talked about the battles of Lexington and Concord where colonial blood was spilled. We kind of have technically a war going on between Great Britain and the American colonies, although it's not officially a war because the colonies have not declared their independence. Okay, so we talked about the first conflict at Lexington and Concord. We talked about the Second Continental Congress and kind of their feelings towards this. And now we're going to talk about another conflict of a higher multitude, the Battle of Breed's, or sometimes more famously called Bunker Hill. Now, anybody want to guess who was named Major General of the Massachusetts Militia about this time? Who was named Major General of the Massachusetts Militia? In other words, this person is the head of the Massachusetts Militia. He like the George Washington of the Continental Army. Anybody want to guess?
John Parker?
No? It's a good guess.
Thomas Gage.
No, he's on the other side.
Joseph Warren.
Who's kind of the guy that's got everything done around here for the colonists in Massachusetts?
Joseph Warren.
Joseph Warren, very good. So Dr. Joseph Warren has been named Major General of the Massachusetts Militia. He's the guy calling all the shots militarily now for the American colonists in Massachusetts. Well, can you imagine that British General Gage is a little upset about the events of Lexington and Concord? And because of that, on June 16th of 1775, Joseph Warren gets word that British General Gage has ordered an attack on Charlestown, which is the most important city in Massachusetts, and it overlooks Boston Harbor. Okay? So, because of this unrest on the side of the British because of the events of Lexington and Concord, on June 16, 1775, Dr. Joseph Warren, who now is leading the Massachusetts militia, has gotten word that General Gage is planning an attack on Charlestown, which is on your ID sheet, which is a very important port city in Massachusetts, and it's in Boston Harbor. So on June 16th of 1775, Warren had got the word that British General Gage had ordered an attack on Charlestown, a city that overlooked Boston Harbor. Now I gave you a map of this battle we're going to talk about. Might be wise to pull that map out in front of you so you kind of know what we're talking about. It's that nice little colored map that some of you were so impressed with. So because Warren gets word that British General Gage has ordered an attack on Charleston, which is a city that overlooked Boston Harbor, he orders, he being Warren, orders 1,000 men up Bunker Hill to dig fortifications on the hill. Now if you look at where Charleston is in Boston Harbor, which hill is farther back from the harbor? There's two hills, right? There's Breed's Hill, you see that on the map? And Bunker Hill. Which one's farthest from Boston Harbor? Bunker Hill. So what Warren does is he orders 1,000 men to go up to the top of Bunker Hill and dig fortifications on the hill. What are fortifications, Budge?
Defenses.
Defense areas, like they can be trenches with logs put on, they can be lots of things. But in preparation for this attack on Charlestown, Warren orders 1,000 men to go up on Bunker Hill and start to dig fortifications. So I'll kind of repeat this again. Joseph Warren has been named Major General of the Massachusetts Militia, and on June 16th of 1775, he gets word that British General Thomas Gage has ordered an attack on Charlestown, which is a city that overlooks Boston Harbor. As a result of that, Warren orders 1,000 men up Bunker Hill to dig fortifications on the hill. Now, taking in consideration that the subtopic is the Battle of Breed's, parentheses, Bunker Hill, what might that tell you?
They pass Bunker Hill and get to Breed's.
I mean, which one's first?
They pass Bunker Hill.
You look at your map, which would they pass Bunker Hill to get to Breed's Hill, or the other way around? Yeah, what they do is they mistakenly build the fortification on Breed's Hill, which is the first hill from the harbor, right? and that's closer to Boston Harbor. So if you look at your map here, here's Boston Harbor right here. This is Breeds Hill, this is Bunker Hill. He ordered them to dig the fortifications up on Bunker Hill. They mistakenly dig the fortifications on Breeds Hill instead. Now what's the idea? What are they gonna put on top of, what was Warren gonna put on top of Bunker Hill if they'd have done it correctly?
Cannon.
Yeah, very good. He's gonna put cannons on there, okay? Well, when these 1,000 men mistake and dig the fortification on Breeds Hill, are the cannonballs going to be easier to hit Boston Harbor or harder? Easier, it's closer. So, and what ships are in Boston Harbor? The British, right. So the British know that the militia cannons will be able to reach their ships that are docked in Boston Harbor, so they view this as an act of aggression on the part of the colonists. That wasn't the point, weren't they going to dig defensive fortifications on Bunker Hill? Well, when they dug them on Breeds Hill, the British took that as, oh my goodness, they're going to put those cannons up on Breeds Hill in which they can easily reach our ships in the harbor. So all of a sudden the British view this action as an offensive against them, not a defensive move. You see what I'm saying? Okay, and you act differently if someone's on the defensive in comparison to someone being on the offensive. So we'll read that again. So the men mistakenly build the fortifications on Breeds Hill, which is considerably closer to Boston Harbor. Cannon fire from Breeds Hill, because of the close proximity, would be able to reach Boston Harbor where the British forces were stationed, and the British, knowing that militia cannons could reach their ships docked in Boston Harbor, view this as an act of aggression, or they view it as the colonists on the offensive instead of their intended defensive. Does that make sense? So, as a result of these aggressive actions on the part of the colonists, on the morning of June 17th, 1775, 3,000 British redcoats land their forces at Charlestown. So because they view this action on the part of the Massachusetts militia as aggressive or offensive, they are taking action, and the next day they said 3,000 British troops on an attack of Charlestown.
June 17th.
June 17th, yeah. So if you kind of look at your map, Charleston's on Boston Harbor. The militia have dug fortifications on Breeds Hill. And as a result of that, at dawn on the morning of June 17, 1775, 3,000 British redcoats land at Charlestown. By the early afternoon, they have burned the city to the ground. By the early afternoon, British soldiers, 3,000 strong, have burned Charlestown to the ground. And where do they turn their attention next? To Breeds Hill. And they're going to teach these colonists a lesson at Breeds Hill. So I'll repeat that again just to make sure we get it. At dawn, the morning of June 17, 1775, 3,000 British redcoats land their forces at Charlestown, and by early afternoon on the same day, they have burned the city to the ground. And the redcoats then turn their attention upon that colonial militia that's on Breeds Hill. Now, what would be your tendency if you are armed and on top of Breeds Hill as those British soldiers march towards you? What would be your tendency to do? Well, that'd be great if they had a bunch of cannons, okay? So, yeah, well, that's okay. No, I'm just making a point. So, they're going to want to fire. If somebody's coming at you, aren't you going to want to fire? Because the closer they get, the more threat they are. Well, as these redcoats approach Breeds Hill, the colonial militia, under the direction of Dr. Joseph Warren, are given orders to hold their fire until those soldiers get within 50 yards of them. Now that's kind of touchy, because what are they doing the whole time they're marching? They're firing at you. You're under assault. and you're told not to fire back until they get within 50 yards, and you're, you know, that'd be a little nerve-wracking. But Dr. Joseph Warren had a reason for that. So, as the redcoats approached Breed's Hill, the colonial militia were given orders by Dr. Warren to hold their fire until the British soldiers were within 50 yards of their position. What's an old saying we have gotten from this? Hold your fire till you see the whites of their eyes. Have you ever heard that expression? That's kind of what it means. They got to be close enough that you can see the whites of their eyes. Okay? Well, finally, they get within 50 yards of their position, and when the order is given, the colonial militia fires at the redcoats, forcing them all the way back down the hill to regroup. So picture these redcoats, 3,000 redcoats coming up the hill. They're waiting, waiting, waiting. They get within 50 yards. They send a barrage of fire at the redcoats. It damages them enough that they have to go to the bottom of the hill and regroup. Okay, so far so good, right? So far so good. Now, during this fighting, a little known person by the name of Salem Poor makes a courageous stand against the British redcoats. On this first assault that the British put upon Breed's Hill, one man stands out as very courageous, and that was Salem Poor. So during the fighting, little-known Salem Poor makes a courageous stand against the British redcoats. Poor's an interesting individual. He's a former New England slave, and he bought his own freedom in 1769. So here's Salem Poor, a free black man, leading the charge at Breed's Hill for the Massachusetts militia. Salem Poor, a freed black man. He bought his freedom in 1769. He paid money to become free. And he's kind of leading the charge at the first assault by the British. So Poor, a former New England slave who bought his own freedom in 1769, is written in journals as encouraging the militia by hollering, "Stand your ground. If they want blood, let's show them their own." So according to documentation of the Battle of Breed's or Bunker Hill, little-known Salem Poor, a former New England slave who bought his freedom in 1769, is standing tall, shouting, "Stand your ground. If they want blood, let's show them their own." Stand your ground. If they want blood, let's show them their own. Interesting enough, Salem Poor is one of approximately 100 African Americans at this battle fighting the British for colonial freedom. Salem Poor is one of about 100 Negroes or African Americans that are fighting in this battle. Well, the man leading the American defense of Breed's or Bunker Hill is who? Now, who's the man leading America's defense, though? Joseph Warren. And he was serious about this freedom for American colonists. Prior to the battle, he actually was quoted as saying, "I hope I shall die up to my knees in blood." I hope I shall die up to my knees in blood. He was willing to give his life for the cause. Remember, this guy started kind of this whole thing, didn't he? Way back. Started speaking out against British policies and has continued to evolve into one of the unknown leaders of the American Revolution. So prior to this battle of Breed's or Bunker Hill, Warren was quoted as saying, "I hope I shall die up to my knees in blood." So, we've had the first assault of Breed's Hill, right? The colonial militia has fought them back and they've had to go back and regroup, right? They take a second charge at Breed's Hill. Again, the colonial militia hold their ground and the British have to go back down the hill and regroup for a second time. Are they horribly outnumbered? You don't think so?
It's like 1 to 3, isn't it?
They're pretty outnumbered. 3,000 British soldiers, okay? So they're doing pretty good. They've now defended the hill twice, forcing the British to go down and retreat. And what they're trying to do is get them to do what?
Leave.
Give up and go away, okay? So during these first two assaults, Major General Joseph Warren, with the help of Salem Corps, helped the militia hold the line, and they rallied the Patriots to stand their ground, both the first assault and the second assault. Unfortunately, the Redcoats come with a third assault, which overwhelms Warren and his men, as hundreds of British soldiers swarm across those Patriot defense lines that they dug. So they kicked them out of there twice, but the third time they came, the Patriots could hold no longer, and the British soldiers swarm across their defense lines. Colonial militiamen were having their gunpowder run out during this third assault, and many of them simply scattered during this third assault because they had no gunpowder left to fire. They were really hoping they could get the British to back off after these first two assaults. Unfortunately, the British took a third assault. They ran out of gunpowder. They were overwhelmed. They began to scatter. Okay? As they began to scatter, the American Revolution took its biggest blow yet. As they began to scatter, they being the Massachusetts militia, as they began to scatter, the American Revolution is going to take its biggest blow yet. What's going to happen? Anybody want to guess what happened on that third assault? Go ahead. Joseph Warren was killed on the third assault. So it was at this point the American Revolution took its biggest blow on the third assault as Major General Dr. Joseph Warren is shot and killed. The 34-year-old patriot will become an American martyr for independence. I'll spell martyr for you. So the 34-year-old patriot, Joseph Warren, becomes an American martyr for independence. Martyr is spelled M-A-R-T-Y-R. M-A-R-T-Y-R. So, during the first two assaults on Breed's Hill, Major General Warren helps the militia hold the line. He rallies the Patriots to stand their ground. But the Redcoats' third assault overwhelms Warren and his men. Hundreds of British soldiers swarm across the Patriot defense lines. Many members of the colonial militia scatter when their gunpowder runs out. And it is at this point the American Revolution takes its biggest blow yet as Major General Warren is shot and killed. And the 34-year-old patriot becomes an American martyr for independence. What's a martyr? You know what a martyr is? Someone that dies for a cause, okay? Somebody's killed and you put them up on a pedestal as a hero and you rally around that person. Okay, that's a martyr. Okay?
A symbol of sacrifice.
Symbol of sacrifice. Very good. Yep. Now, when the smoke clears and ends the Battle of Breed's or Bunker Hill, however you look at it, Joseph Warren and 115 other Americans have lost their lives. So when the smoke clears, ending the Battle of Bunker or Breed's Hill, Joseph Warren and 115 other Americans have lost their lives. 115, 115. Now, I want you to guess, keeping in mind that 115 Americans were killed at the Battle of Breed's or Bunker Hill. What do you think the number of British soldiers killed?
Over
What'd you say?
1,500.
Pretty close, 1,054. 1,054 British soldiers were killed during this assault. 10 times as many almost. And where were most of them killed? During those two assaults, right? When they let them get within 50 yards and fired. Okay, a lot of them lost their lives at that point. You will find when we get into the American Revolution that the British are very formal in the way they do warfare. How do they march? They march in lines, straight at you. Okay? They don't hide behind rocks, they have military tradition. And unfortunately, the American colonists do the same thing because they're British. And you'll be amazed. They line up against each other, and the first group goes ready, aim, fire, and people fall down. Then the next group goes ready, aim, fire, and the others fall down while they're loading their weapons. They have military tradition that you'll just shake your head, and you think, why are they standing out in that open field? That's the way they did things in those days. So again, American losses, 115, including Joseph Warren. British losses were much more devastating, as 1,054 British soldiers were killed. Now guess who the British lost on their side in the Battle of Breeds or Bunker Hill? No, John Pitcairn. Remember the British commander that led the British against John Parker and his 77 militia at Lexington, and then went on to Concord? John Pitcairn, the British, it's on your ID sheet, the British major, was also killed during the Battle of Breeds or Bunker Hill.
It's not on the ID sheet yet.
John Pitcairn's not?
Yeah, it is. It's on the other
Oh, it's on the
side.
battles of Lexington. Is it Pitcairn or
Pitcairn is actually,
It's not
no,
Pitcairn.
Pitcairn is how it's actually. Okay, I want you to get to the start of your notes on the struggle towards independence.